Well, apparently, doing a video in your car activates your car's microphone, and it thinks that you're on a call. That's weird. I don't want to do that, but anyway, just to get things going again, I haven't done one of these Nascent GM podcasts in a bit, or broadcasts, and I'm going to start trying to do these sort of daily, sort of a Vlogmas kind of thing, but if Sundays don't happen, like it didn't happen yesterday, we'll just call it days 1 and 2 on this one. So, first of all, welcome to the Nascent GM podcast. Glad to have you with me. Okay, like I said, and I've said before, it will be a podcast someday. So, welcome to the Nascent GM. I'll just call it that. Because the Nascent GM is supposed to be all about helping you as a new game master, sometimes not even a player first, game master, to move into the game mastering space. And I'm going to focus on the Savage Worlds rule set. So, what we have is, first of all, I know you can definitely, Peg Show is a good place to get your information. They just actually went live, Peg.show, and they're on their own channel and everything, and it's the official Pinnacle Entertainment Group. It's Great White Games doing business as Pinnacle Entertainment. It is a great show. Ron Blessing hosts it. He has his own podcast, but he's had other podcasts and stuff before. And I actually first got introduced to Blessing when I did my marathon through Savage Worlds GM podcast. And that's part of the reason why I call it this podcast, but it's not pod yet. And I hope those guys are doing well. They don't seem to have posted in a while. So I hope they didn't pod fade on us. But maybe they needed to. But I have to give a shout out to them, though, because it's because of them that I am starting this channel and resuming this channel. And on top of that, that I have started the Offline Cafe initiative. Now, the basic idea, of course, for this channel is to just make a family-friendly podcast or vlog that will make it so kids who are currently learning how to be game masters can learn. And if parents want to join in on it, they're welcome to. But at least parents can listen in on this broadcast and say, yep, this guy's not using foul language. This guy's not using foul concepts. And so, actually, that might be a good topic for the drive, because I'm driving home from my new job. I got a job, and it's wonderful to have one. But I'm driving, and talking to you is something that I'd like to do if you were here in the car with me. So let's talk about Session 0. This obviously, I should probably talk about rules first, or at least knowing what system you're going to play first, or even how to get a group together. I've formed, let's go back to there. I mean, I will go to Session 0 stuff, and as it is, part of the family-friendly thing, topics. You don't put into your role-playing games or into any channels like this topics that will make people uncomfortable. So, having had an experience like this, we were starting a new thing. Somebody made a character that dealt with a current political issue and brought it into the game, and I had to say right there, stop. We don't bring political issues into the game, because there are people who feel uncomfortable in both directions. We're here to have fun, and my job as the game master is to protect your fun. So, no. Just axe it right there. And the game turned out to be a lot of fun, and nobody had any problem with any of those political issues. Now, that being said, let's go back to, of course, why do we do this? Because, well, I mean, oh gosh, I'm just kind of all over the place here, and I'm sorry about that. But the main thing that I want to get across is that this this whatever cast it is, we'll call it a whatever cast, is all about both improving your ability as a game master, but also I do want this to be applicable to players as well. Players, I want you to see what goes on in the GM's mind, because there's always more of you than there is of us. And the thing is that you're only portraying one character, whereas we are portraying a handful of them, if not more, every time we play. So I think maybe each session, each of these posts, I'm going to try and just give a player tip and a game master tip. I think maybe that's going to be the format of these shows. I'm still trying to figure out what the format's going to be. So I'm saying, for my format, we need to have, that I would like to have a news section. I'd like to have a just random thought section, and then a player tip, and then finally a GM tip. And just kind of an action item for you to try and apply either the player tip or the GM tip into your play. And so for my player tip, actually for both tips this time, just remember why we're here, why we're doing this hobby that we do. Because there's plenty of other hobbies we could be doing. We could be avid movie watchers and be sitting around discussing movies. We could be, I don't know, we could be knitters. We could be stamp collectors. There's plenty of other hobbies, things that would occupy our time and admittedly take our money gladly. But we choose to do role-playing games. Now, I think part of it is what one of my game creator heroes, what he said, and that creator hero is John Wick, not to be confused with any movie character of the same name. John Wick, I first became aware of, to a degree, with the card game and the spin-off role-playing game of Legend of the Five Rings. And he then went on to write one of my favorite settings that I've ever seen, or apparently I've game mastered a couple times, so I can't remember doing it. But such is my mind. But the name of that podcast, or the name of that setting, was 7th Sea. 7th Sea was a blast. It's probably one of my all-time favorite settings, and I'm definitely going to savage it, especially with the new setting the new 7th Sea reboot that came out a little bit ago. And I bought the PDFs for that because, quite frankly, I love it, and I love the setting, the swashbuckling atmosphere. It was great. So that's 7th Sea, and John, and he's got a few other ones, but I just, due to funds and time, never got the other settings. Now I want actually where you play the trolls and goblins instead of playing the heroes, and that's really funny in the concept. And so if you get a chance, go check his stuff out. He's got 2 excellent books that, if you're a game master, I would recommend you pick up a copy of each. They're a collection of his articles that he wrote for different magazines and things like that. And it's called Play Dirty and Play Dirty 2. And they have wonderful bits of wisdom and advice in it. Things like, who's holding the torch? You got your dungeoneers. They're down in their dungeon. They're getting ready to go into combat. Who's holding the torch? Who's got the light source that lights it so that they can see these trolls and goblins that can see in the dark and combat them? So the thief says, I can't do it. I need to be able to sneak. And the wizard says, I can't do it. I need both hands to be able to cast a spell. And the fighter says, well, I can't do it. I got to hold my sword and shield. So who's holding the light? Who's holding the torch? And as a game master, throwing even such a simple thing in there as that can easily make the game more interesting. So let's talk about why we game. And I am going to another part of one of these Play Dirty books, because there's two of them, and I own both of them. Thank you, Mr. Wick. The big thing that I really like about it is that he explains that if, like, when we read, it's kind of, we are engaging our imaginations. We're filling in those gaps. And we're seeing it portrayed in our minds. And reading is often one of the best ways to experience a good story. But sometimes our mind gets so caught up in the story that we don't even realize that we're not in our own world anymore, that we've gone into that world so deep that we just wish we could stay and experience more. Not only do we want to know what Aragorn's story is, but we want to know what happened. Who's the guy that's standing next to Eowyn? Those kind of questions just pop into our minds. We are like, well, what happened? What happened on that turn that they didn't take? And so that's why, as players and as game masters, we come to this hobby. We come here because we want to be able to continue to experience a story of a world that we loved. I mean, yes, there is that question of, well, what about places where the ultimate good deed has been done? Because it could be argued that with Lord of the Rings, the ultimate good deed has been done. With Babylon 5, with Star Wars, to just name three different genres of stories. Ultimately, the good deed has been done. There's really nothing that your character is going to be able to do that will top tossing the Emperor down the shaft. And I know there's I'm not getting into the overall expanded universe, and I'm not getting into the prequels and the sequels, no. I'm just saying, from the stories that, my friends and I, mainly my friends, and I just sit and listen, we would sit and we would have hours of conversation about the history of the Empire and how it developed and how it became this and became that, and just, the whole story just engaged us for hours. And, it's so engaging that you get online comics like Darths and Droids, excellent comic if you haven't read it, that are able to say, in a universe where Star Wars didn't exist, and a bunch of role players created the story, what would the story be? And it explains that even Jar Jar came from the imagination of a 7-year-old little sister who just got roped into playing. And, commentaries aside, better version of the story, and this one does have swears, so it is not family friendly, but Belated Media really does have a really cool treatment on episodes 1, 2, and 3. And you can find them here on YouTube. But, like I said, they've got swears in them, so you might want to be careful with those. The first one's not as bad because they do have actually a version of it without the swears, but so far I've been unable to find 2 and 3 without the swears, as he puts it, and as lots of people put it. So just take that with the warning that it is. So that being said, I just remember how much passion, how much love we as the fans had for the original Star Wars trilogy. And the thing is that Terry Brooks taught me this lesson when he and I were talking after a presentation he gave. He told me that it's the fans who own the product. It's the fans who own the world. And when you own that world, you want to see things stay true to what you believe about it. That's why he said the correct pronunciation of the land that he created is Shannara, not Shinnara. He pronounced it Shinnara originally, but he later changed his pronunciation to Shannara because that's how the fans pronounce it, and he stays true to what the fans believe about that. And the same thing happened to a degree with Stephen King when he went back to his Dark Tower universe. He had taken almost a decade off, and so he went back and re-immersed himself. He bought the first 4 books on audiobook, and he listened to them back to back. He talked to the young lady who runs the darktower.net, and she helped clarify some things for him and helped him understand some of the ins and outs of his own world. He was willing to take the time to learn that. And that's what really impresses me about creators like that. Sorry, Mr. Lucas, you failed on that one. You really should have gone back and watched the original trilogy to make sure that at least in your dialogue you didn't contradict yourself. But that being said, this all goes around the same reason. Why do we role play? Why do we spend hours and hours, sometimes weekly, sometimes daily? I mean, I hit Thursdays, and I've got a game almost every day. And it's so much fun. Why do I do this? Why do we do this? And it is because we want to spend some more time in a land that we love, or discover new lands, maybe something that our friends loved, and we can go in and discover them ourselves. But we do it to spend time in those lands, and because in a role-playing game, as Mr. Wick put it, the audience and the performers or the storytellers are one and the same. We are all, we've kind of, he calls it the fifth wall, because we talk about fourth wall breaks and stuff like that all the time, but it's the fifth wall that really makes the difference. We are sitting there in a situation where we're telling ourselves the story that we want to hear in that story. So, is that new Star Wars story that you create canon? Nope, not one bit. But, is it a Star Wars story? It sure is. And if you as a player and you as a game master want to spend time in the universe together and create a collective story together, then you're doing great. That's what it's all about. It's about engaging your mind and having that fun that becomes your gaming experience. So that's where I really love role-playing games. Now, to apply this to Savage Worlds, the great thing about Savage Worlds is that Savage Worlds can do almost all of it just about as well as you could hope. Could it do Star Wars? Yes. Could it do Babylon 5? Yes. Could it do Unforgiven? Yep. Could it do Maltese Falcon? Oh yeah. It's just a simple thing. As a game master, we select and choose what rules we're going to include and what rules we're not going to include. Those are called setting rules. So, for example, if you want to do Maltese Falcon and you want a great resource for it, Deadlands Noir. However, there's a warning with that. Deadlands Noir is set in the Deadlands universe, so it's got the split between the USA and the CSA. It's got the whole horror aspect added to it. But say you want to play a straight investigative game. Guess what? The game master can just choose to not have the investigation going on. Or not the investigation, but the horror side. Oh, there's my turn that I was just going to hit. Anyway, they can just choose not to have the horror side. And that's great. If you've not done the horror side, you can still have a great investigative game. As a matter of fact, the adventure generator in Deadlands Noir is one of my all-time favorites. I really can't think of a better adventure generator than the one that comes in from Deadlands Noir. Because almost every story that's told in a role-playing game is oh shoot. Anyway, almost every one of them is an adventure story, or is an investigative story. There's a mystery to almost every single story you could want to tell. And so that's really where I want to apply it to Savage Worlds, is that in Savage Worlds, you can and should try all the genres. Think that Savage Worlds can't handle a good fantasy genre? Try again. It can handle fantasy and handle it very well. But if you want specifically that D&D feel of the rules and the setting and Greyhawks and Blackmoors and Eberrons and not Eberrons. I don't know all the settings for D&D. Anyway, I play in a once a week kind of almost Forgotten Realms kind of game or not once a week, once a month game with some of my best friends. And that's the other reason why we role play. These people that we role play with, that we share these adventures with, become brothers and sisters in arms. It ultimately builds friendships that can last lifetimes. So, hey, thanks for joining me. I'm glad to be back, and I'm gonna try and one day short do a Vlogmas. So we'll call this Vlogmas Day 1 on the 2nd of December, 2019. I really appreciate you guys joining me, and I look forward to sharing my adventures as a broadcaster with you. Have a good one.